Hello and welcome to section 3 of chapter 2 on personality. Today we're looking at genetic influences on personality. So we're looking at the nature side of basically who you are and what makes up you and your behavior and your patterns of thought and all those good things that we want. So Edward Thorndike, going way back, very old psychologist, said that it was heredity that caused us to be the way we are, our personality. John Watson said it's experience. Everything's based on rewards and punishments and all that good stuff. And so this nature versus nurture debate has gone back to the early 20th century, which is very early in the psychological game. There's a third thing now, epigenetics. And this is kind of a new field that's emerging that basically your life experiences can mutate your DNA, whether they're good or bad. If you have a good life, you're happy, you can pass on good DNA, happy DNA to your kids. If you have trauma or terrible things that go on in your life, it can mutate your DNA and you're more likely to be stressed, anxiety, depression. That can be passed on to your kids. If you're curious, pause this video and scan the QR code with your phone. There's a great National Geographic article several years ago about epigenetics and this emerging fields of it's not just nature versus nurture. Nurture can cause nature to change for future generations, which is just remarkable and kind of scary as well. Most psychologists think it's both. Not nobody, but there's very few people that are around there going, it's only nature or it's only nurture. Most people agree it's got to be a little bit of both. And so this is where it gets really kind of unique in terms of psychology is how do you study this? So they look at our DNA, which comes from our genes from our DNA. And I'm not a sciencey guy. I can't, yeah. You guys all know how to say deoxyribonucleic nucleic acid, whatever. They made that up. That's fake news. So they measure genes in three ways. One, you can compare it to other species. Two, you can study the temperament of infants and kids before nurture or before the environment can affect them. Or you can do heritability studies on twins. You can look at identical twins, like in this picture. You can look at fraternal twins. You can look at adopted people too. You can compare people that are adopted to their personalities match their adopted parents or their biological parents. Those are ways that you can kind of isolate in the environment and look at it and say, hey, we can look at just the DNA factor in terms of personality to see how heritable it is. So personality is also a very evolutionary thing. To look at the evolutionary perspective, remember we come from monkeys. It was adapted for humans to vary their ways of responding to the world and those around them. Those with good personalities and they were attractive for a mate passed on those qualities to their children. Those that had standoffish, negative personalities maybe didn't find that or attract a mate, and so natural selection did its course. And so, naturally speaking, people through evolution were outgoing, were social people. That's why during this whole, quarantine COVID-19 thing, we're struggling because we want to go out and see people. We want to do things. Samuel D. Gosling studied dog personalities, which he came up with another brilliant psychology study. He got to play with dogs. I mean, they did studies on the beaches. This guy got to play with dogs. Who doesn't want to play with dogs? He found that 4 of the 5 big traits were present in dogs themselves. Dogs were extroverted, or agreeable, or neurotic, or negative, or open to new experience. The only thing he could not measure was conscientiousness. A dog can't really think or tell you about their thought process and their decisions about that. Further study by him and himself and other psychologists has revealed that there's most of the big 5 and 64 other species of animal. I'm not sure. Maybe they studied a goldfish at some point. That's kind of strange. So, babies are born with a genetically determined temperament. So, how irritated you get, how fussy a baby is based on DNA. Because when a baby is new, well, babies are always new, the environment has not affected them as much. And so they don't have that learning like adults or even older children have. So their reactivity, their soothability, their positive, negative emotionally is all about their temperament. Physiological differences are evident in different temperaments as well. I mean, there are different things in terms of the structure of the brain, how they react emotionally, how the heart rate can increase, and all the things that go on in our bodies biologically to certain emotions. Let me go back there because this is our big extended family, and so it's very funny in here. There's my 3 kids, and then there's actually 2 biological cousins, 2 step cousins, and 1 kid who's not even related to any of the kids at all in any way. So I'll let you figure that one out. write in the comments or email me which ones you think are the two cousins of my kids. And if you don't know who my kids are, yeah, that's probably weird. I probably shouldn't put that on the internet. My bad. So, heritability is a statistical estimate of the proportion of the total variation in the trait attributed to the genetic variation within a group. Scientist. It's how much stuff you get from your parents. Basically, how much junk do you get from your parents is your heritability. So if you have identical twins and you put one in the desert, they could get skinny. And if you give one too much dessert, they get fat. Because we're kind of not this blank slate. We're more of a coloring book that our nature is designs us away, but then nurture can change our bodies, our views, our personalities. So how much stuff do you get from your fam? That's what heritability is. Behavioral geneticists, they study this. A 1.0 proportion means that it's 100% due to genetic variation. You 100% got this from your parents, or from your genes, I should say. Height is an example of being highly heritable. If you have tall parents, there's chances are you're going to be a tall kid. If you have short parents, you're probably going to be short. Now, things can change that. With America's high protein diets and our steady amount of food, Americans are getting taller. We're also getting heavier, but we are getting taller as a nation. They've studied the average height of tables going back to George Washington's days, and they go up by several inches to the modern times. Americans are getting bigger. And so even the immigrants that come here, they maybe bring down the overall average height of Americans, but when they live here, their average heights are going up generation to generation. So this can be modified by the environment. Once again, that notion of epigenetics coming into play. So, computing heritability. There's no way to estimate this at this point, but you got to infer by studying people with similar DNA. Close relatives, it's tough because they grew up in the same environment. You and your siblings were raised in the same environment. You had the same parents, you had the same, grandparents, you went to the same schools, maybe you had different friends, but a lot of those things are exactly the same. So to basically have a study where we can isolate just the DNA is very difficult to do. There are ways to do it. They've studied adopted children. So kids that have been adopted at a very young age before the environment can affect them, they can study their personality traits, they can study their IQ, they can study a myriad of things, their height, their BMI, all that thing, and then compare it back to biological parents. And they can see, are there tendencies that connect them to the biological parents, and so that would mean there was a DNA link, or is their personalities and their IQ match their adopted parents, the people that didn't raise them. So the environment would be the adopted parents, the biological parents are the DNA ones. What they find is the DNA, the biological parents have more influence over personality than the adopted parents would. So nature is more powerful for your personality than nurture. Or you can study identical twins, and in rare cases, they don't do this very much anymore, but there's instances of identical twins being separated at a very young age. They have the exact same DNA, raised in different environments, and they find out that yes, they have similar personalities, they have similar IQs, they have similar outlooks and all that stuff. Can't be fraternal twins. Fraternal twins, yes, they're born at the same time they're twins, but their DNA is basically the same as you and your siblings. The only thing that makes them different is they used to be womb mates. So it's best to study those that are separated. These are two identical twins that I used to teach and coach, Justin and Jason Conklin, great kids, fun, always argued with each other, funny kids. They'd partner up in basketball practice and never stop arguing. So how heritable are our personality traits? Identical twins raised separately have very similar personalities. And so that shows that it is very highly heritable. Traits are typically 0.50, which doesn't sound very high, but height's about 0.7. So 50% of the variation is attributed to genetic differences, which means the other half is nurture. Wow, it's about 50-50. So, evaluating these genetic theories, it leads to hope that people will be more accepting of their kids. The kids are the way they are, and you can't change it. That's their personality. They were born that way. So, cope with it. Find a way to make it work. We'll never be able to completely transform our own personality. You can hide things, but your own personality is who you are. You are born that way. Genetic predisposition does not mean genetic inevitability, though. You can change things. You can change your mindset. You can change your outlook. You can change your personality. And so we're not a blank slate. We're not a rigid sculpture that's already done. We're a coloring book. You have some guidelines and you get to fill in how you want to color it. Choose the right colors and stay in the lines or go out of the lines, whatever you care about. Those are your experiences. This is from an adult coloring book. Is it a hipster or a homeless guy? Who cares? Same thing. And so that's what I have for irritability and biology, the evolutionary genetic point of view for personality. If you have any questions, let me know. Next time we'll get into the environmental influences. I hope you enjoyed this.